Chapter 5. Caden. As usual, my mother had prepared dinner, and we were sitting around ready for family discussions after dessert. How perfect. It was as if I'd never left home, which I hadn't, but to my credit, I'd enrolled in college and was slated to graduate, but not with the best grades in the world, but I thought it would impress my family when I put on that cap and gown. They just loved to see me wearing my cap and gown when I graduated from high school. My mother took it and placed it in a plastic bag, and I thought she would have bronzed it if she could. I was proud to say that I'd been focused on my studies. A little too focused, because I wasn't exactly the type who men or women were attracted to at first blush. I hadn't spent enough time learning how to pick up men, or being picked up. I should have downloaded an app where I could meet gay men my age, but I skewed a little older. I loved older men. I didn't know why, but I just was attracted to some older men. I had no daddy issues if I could remember. Now if I could get that across to Grayle. But first of all, I had to get near him, and I didn't know if that were possible. How was I going to do that? I still hadn't grown out of living with my parents, in a bedroom I'd had since my mother removed me from my bassinet in her room, with me kicking and screaming. When I'd finally gotten used to my sanctuary of a bedroom, after years of feeling abandoned sometime in the 10th grade and a teenager, I'd placed a lock on the door to keep my parents from entering, especially when I'd wanted to jack off to my posters and magazines I had hidden under my mattress, and finally discovered porn sites by accident. I'd accepted that this was for my own good, and I was becoming an adult. However, because I was in my parents' home at 20-something, you couldn't pretend you were a grown man, but you had to accept their wishes because after all it was their home and locks weren't permitted. Therefore, I had to play by their rules and get the hell out after I'd graduated from college. This I'd promised myself. Maybe that was why I hadn't had a serious date with a man since I became old enough to date someone older than myself. What man wanted to come to your home, only to discover that you would bring him to your upstairs bedroom in a house you didn't own, and your parents' room was down the hall? Who wanted to sneak out in the morning and run into an older man in his boxers on his way to the restroom? What man would want to visit your room, only to discover it was filled with your bunk bed fashioned into a race car, and posters on the wall with hot gay guys, or ones you thought were gay, because you'd adorned your room with their pictures where you'd masturbated on them and tried to clean the picture off, and there was a round hole just at the point where his cock was supposed to be. You would have to explain why the picture had a hole, and you couldn't, because the pictures were hung there to give you the best dreams of your life. My first date with a man was just like that, with a few detours in the story. I brought this dude home to meet my parents, and then showed him my room. I didn't know he'd categorized me as just a hookup, and politely bowed out once he'd entered the living room and seen my father lying in his favorite chair, with the television turned up loudly. It was then he informed me that he had a roommate, and I later learned that his roommate was his partner. Before I'd gotten that information, I'd said, "Can't we go to your place?" He glanced at me and chuckled. "Fuck no. I just met you, and besides my partner is in bed." The next date I had was with another sketchy guy. I'd gone to his apartment because he'd left out crucial information. He was married, and his partner had driven to the next town because of business, and not wanting to stay in a hotel, the husband drove home, only to witness me in bed sleeping in his husband's arms. The husband apologized to me for his husband's behavior. "This isn't the first time he's done this," he admitted, his eyes lowered from the shame. "He's a bad boy, and I'm getting tired of this." Then he turned to me lying in bed with his husband and said, "What would the children think? It's a good thing I left them with your mother." It was good for me that he was a decent man, and that taught me a lesson I'd never forget. Find out about the person you're getting involved with. Googling their name won't tell you everything, but it would have helped then. And pay attention to your surroundings. I saw all these stuffed animals and toys, and I thought he had some kind of fetish, reliving his childhood or something like that. This was just a few of my missteps to finding a man who could love and want me. I wasn't proud of my missteps when getting involved with men, but I did promise myself that it would never happen again with any man. Therefore, I thought it would be interesting to Google the man I'd become infatuated with. However, since I hadn't done that as of yet, because it was dinner time at Jane and David Walker's, I'd ask my father why they'd named the town Nevermore, and about Grayle Meadows. I knew my father hated salads, so now was the right time to ask, when my mother placed a bowl of unfamiliar bitter greens in front of him. Why is the town named Nevermore? It seems ominous and depressing to name it that. Why not something happy? I don't know, son. You'll have to read the history, because all I know is the folklore. Well, tell me, Dad. It wasn't as if I was going anywhere. I think this guy was despondent over the loss of his wife, and when she died he couldn't stay in a big city and he found this town, then because he read The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe over and over, until he went mad and named it Nevermore. That's it. I questioned. There must be more to it. Someone had to know. When I had time, I'd do research. One professor who either knew the answers to the questions we'd proposed or had BS us through his philosophy class would say, "Do your research and have the answers or not the next time we meet." We'd all looked at him and shook our heads, because after all it was Philosophy 101 and few students had the answers if you weren't René Descartes, and even he wasn't sure about his existence in this world. So what the fuck? That's all I got, my father said, shrugging his shoulders. Anything else you will have to consult the library, or YouTube. What does he know about YouTube? He just figured out how to use his new iPhone, I thought. I didn't have any more time to waste, therefore, I asked the question that was my main focus. I had distracted my father and he'd left the salad, pushed it to the side and smiled, then ate the main meal of meatloaf and green bean casserole while he waited for his dessert. After the main course, my mother placed her signature hot apple pie à la mode in front of me and my father, and she watched as I ate the entire thing. I asked the question that would give me some insight into the man I thought would, or could be my life partner. Father, do you know anything about a Grayle Meadows? Why do you ask? Couldn't he just answer the question? But my father always followed everything with a question. I wanted to say, "Oh, for fuck's sake, father, just answer the fucking question." But out of respect, I just turned to my mother. Your father is too busy with his hobbies to know who you're talking about. Now me, I have this book club where we would meet twice a month, and we discussed everyone in town, and that included Mrs. Meadows, Grayle's mother. You know she's dead. I found that out in the papers. She was a lovely woman, and after she got involved in our club, because our members had one thing in common, we had gay sons, and she joined, because at the time she didn't like the people she'd associated with, because they were whispering about people who couldn't afford the country club dues, and they were intolerant of gays, and her only son was gay. She was a sensitive woman, and she praised and bragged about her son Grayle. He'd gone off to a college in New York to become a lawyer, but he moved to New York and stayed. That's all I know for now. A friend of mine who's in our book club can introduce you to him if you'd like, my mother said. I hear he's back and here to stay. A good catch for some young man. Not you, because he's too old. If I heard that again, I'd upchuck all that wonderful apple pie. Don't try to matchmake, my father warned my mother. You know you're not good at that. Remember when you had a party for Caden? That time I wanted to forget. She thought I was straight, and she had everyone over for my 16th birthday, and caught me in my bedroom kissing someone. I couldn't remember who, but it was a good thing she was early, because we were ready to jerk each other off. She didn't see my hand inside the boy's unzipped pants. You screamed, and everyone thought you'd had a heart attack, my father confessed. That was the night you acknowledged that you were gay. Remember, sweetheart? My mother said, in her warm, sweet mother's voice. She leaned over and comforted me with her hand. I remembered, but that was something I needed to forget, and if I knew my mother, she'd never let me forget it, and she'd probably shared my youthful antics with her book club. I was sure she thought it was cute. Perhaps she traded stories with the other ladies, because they might have discovered being a gay man was far more exciting and interesting than the books they'd planned on reading. My father, on the other hand, was busy creating something in his woodshop when his friends came over. They'd get drunk and talk about their children and how happy they were with them, or how disappointed they'd been in them because they didn't live up to their standards. Any reason to get drunk. My father would ruin his project at the moment, but when he'd sobered up, he'd be on track to creating beautiful tables and chairs. I thought I'd heard enough, and I excused myself to get to my room and call Lane. He answered on the first ring. "What's up, bro? I know why you're calling, but you don't know what I'm doing." I heard a snicker. "Giving Scott a handjob while you're talking to me. I wish. He's still at work, the night shift, but he texted me and said he'd spoken to his friend Cole, and we're invited to Grayle's home for a party next week." "Hello. Hello. Is anyone home?" Lane questioned. "How could that be? It's a little unexpected." I had to wait until my pulse slowed from the instant surge of adrenaline. "It's called life, Caden. It's not that I don't want to go." I heard a disappointed sigh from Lane. "You couldn't stop me if you wanted to," I joked. "That's what you called fortuitous." This is meant to be, I thought. And my next thought was, what the fuck am I going to wear? "Now what was the reason you called?" Lane said. "It's nothing," I said. "I just wanted to know what you were up to. There's this carnival or circus, I don't know what they call it these days, but I wanted to know if you and Scott were going. I think Scott would rather see his parents than go to a carnival. Men his age and Grayle's age are well past that, and Scott doesn't mind going to his parents without me. So, if you're game, we can go together. I miss those things. Remember when we were young, and we'd go for a ride on the Ferris wheels and bumper cars? I think we're well past bumper cars, but not the Ferris wheel. Just don't drink anything, and if you do, make sure your aim is precise. No women or babies," he joked. When we ended the call, Lane was laughing and enjoying his own jokes, and I was checking my wardrobe for a pair of sexy jeans and tee.